Howdy, y'all. Caleb here. uh, that image cracks me up that we just saw. Today, we're going to be talking about the Skink Chief on Stegadon, or as I've labeled it here, the Skink Chad on Stegadon. This is a great hero model. It went up in points, but with Age of Sigmar 3, I think there's some ways that we can utilize it now that are interesting and unique and allow it to pump out some incredible damage for our army. So I'm gonna quickly review the War Scroll, talk about that. If you already know all about that, skip ahead. I'll have some timestamps to get to the juice of this video. But the Stegadon, it can come in three different variants: the normal Stegadon, the Stegadon Chief, and the Engine of the Gods. And they're all kind of on the same. The Chief and the normal are on the same War Scroll, so you do have to kind of parse those out as you're looking at it. But we've got 10 wounds in Coalesced. They'll be in Thunder Lizards. That'll be 12 wounds for this boss, with a move of 8. Pretty slow, but there's ways that we're going to be able to turn that up here in a little bit. A save of 4. It can go down to a 3 if it's fighting 5 or less models. That's very useful, especially now in Age of Sigmar 3, where we're going to have a lot more MSU units and not as many hordes, and so you'll end up using that ability a lot more in on this War Scroll. A bravery of 5, which is pretty terrible, especially in Thunder Lizards. You want a higher bravery than 5, especially for the heroic recovery. In your hero phase, you can roll 2 dice, and if you roll under your bravery, then you can heal D3. That's not going to happen very often for a Stegadon, so keep that in mind, especially in Coalesced. If you're playing your Stegadons in Starborn, that bravery is 10, a lot more likely to do that. We do have some different profiles here for the weapons. Your meteoric javelins, which are for the skinks that are riding on top of it, not very good, but don't forget to roll them. Every once in a while, you'll get one through, do some damage. The Skystreak bow is my personal favorite and how I equip all mine. This has 24-inch range, so that's huge. That's 24-inch range is big, especially when you're moving 8, and so that means you're shooting all the way across the board. It's very hard to hide from these Skystreak bows. They only have 3 attacks. They're 3s and 3s, only -1 Ren, but doing a whopping 3 damage. So these things, when they hit, if they go through, are going to do some pretty big damage. You'll be disappointed sometimes with them. Sometimes you'll hit huge with them. The Sunfire Throwers, I don't play those too often, but they can be good, especially if you're facing hordes, which I think there's only going to be a couple factions that are running a bunch of hordes nowadays. But it can be good, especially because it has an attack profile number, which means we can bump that up, and you'll get to do it multiple times. So it does have its place. It does have its use. If you're playing against a lot of hordes in your meta, you might want to look at that for Sunfire Throws. Today we're going to look at just the Skystreak bows as far as the calculations go. The Stegadon Chief does get this Meteoric War Spear, which isn't bad. It's an extra 3 attacks. There are ways to pump that up, as we'll see here in a minute. 3s and 3s, -1 and 1 damage. And the rest of these are the horns. These are the big hitters. They have massive 4 damage, but does get bracketed. Luckily, we're playing in Gur this season of Age of Sigmar, and so you can always spend a command point in the hero phase if you're bracketed real hard, or not the hero phase, in the combat phase. If you're bracketed real hard, you can spend that command point to fight at full bracket. And that's going to be great for our Stegadons to let them get those horns at full power, but also as many crushing stomps in as we can. And so that's a great command ability to keep in your pocket for this season of Age of Sigmar happening in Gur. So your horns are pretty big. Only 2 attacks though. So if you're not finding ways to pump these up, these aren't going to hit very often. Same with Jaws. Only 2 attacks, but they're going to be doing 2 damage. And then your stomps, you've got 5 attacks at brackets. 3s and 3s again, also -1 Ren, 2 damage. This is a very easy War Scroll to memorize because all your melee is on 3s and 3s, -1 Ren. And so it's a very easy War Scroll to memorize, but not quite as easy to play because you'll have to see some synergies that we're talking about here in a minute. As we look at its actual abilities here, there's a couple things to note, and I think one of them is the crew is treated in the same manner as the mount, and the crew has the Skystreak bow, and so anything that increases your mount's attacks, which is like Prime Warbeast, is also going to increase this. So you can get an extra bow shot with Prime Warbeast, which is kind of nice. You do have a Skink Chief on here, and so they does turn it into a hero. You can see the keywords change here into a keyword for Stegadon Skink Chief. We already talked about the +1 to save for Armored Crest. Gout Fire is where you're doing that flamethrowers and you're getting some mortal wounds on hordes, which is nice. Reroll Battle Shocks for Skinks. That's not too big of a deal in Thunder Lizards, where you're going to be running these a lot, because you're not going to be seeing a whole lot of Skinks. And if you do have a horde of Skinks and Thunder Lizards, then you're probably going to be spending a command point to save them from Bravery instead of re-rolling it, because their Bravery is terrible in Coalesced. Unstoppable Stampede. This is actually pretty cool because you get to do a D3 mortal wounds on a 3-up when you charge. And so this is for anybody within an inch of this Stegadon when it charges. So if you can charge in multiple Stegadons, you can do those mortals. But then also we have the Monstrous Rampages, which you can get an extra D3 mortal wounds on the charge. And so you can actually get some decent damage through on the charge with that and with the monstrous abilities. My favorite thing is to charge a couple Stegadons in so you can get multiple mortal wounds going off, or at least guarantee at least one, because you are rolling on a 3-up. But the big thing here we're going to look at on this War Scroll is a Coordinated Strike. That's this. It's unique to the Stegadon and Skink Chief, and it allows you to add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by a Skink unit. And this Stegadon is keyworded Skink, and so we're going to be able to apply that and a lot of Skink buffs to these Stegadons, which is pretty nice because there's a lot of abilities that we can use on Skinks. So some interesting stuff there. If we're looking just at the base damage of a Stegadon, it's really not all that impressive. If we're just going off the War Scroll, a Skink Chief is only doing about 10 damage to a 4-up save. And that's not all that great, especially in Age of Sigmar 3, where the 4-up save used to kind of be the standard. Now we're going to see a lot of 3-up saves as they're just going to use all-out defense. And so you keep that in mind as we're looking at these damage tables today. The Stegadon with Skystreak Bow kind of goes down a little bit more. You can see it doesn't really lose a whole lot not having the Stegadon Chief on there. His attack isn't really all that impressive. Just 3 attacks doing 1 damage each. And Engine of Gods go down a little bit more as it doesn't have the Skystreak Bow. It does usually do some mortals from the Cosmic Engine, but I didn't factor that in here. So you can see not really that impressive for its points. You're talking 300 points and it's only doing 10 damage. But it's not all about the War Scroll. Some units, all you get is a War Scroll and you don't do anything there. As we know in Seraphon, you have got to stack those buffs up. That's how you get, once you get all those synergies going, that's where our stuff really starts clicking and really starts doing some fun stuff. A quick overview here. I'm going to be talking a lot in Thunder Lizards because I think it really juices up this Stegadon Chief. It does make him a little bit tougher with the extra 2 wounds. And in Thunder Lizards, of course, you're doing your -1 damage from Coalesced. And so it makes him quite a bit tougher. The command trait Prime Warbeast is fantastic on the Stegadon Chief because it adds 1 to the attack characteristics of weapons used by the General's mount. And that's unique because usually command traits don't affect mounts. But this one specifically allows you to affect the mount. That means all those weapon profiles that we're looking at his War Scroll, we're talking the Skystreak Bow, we're talking the Meteoric Javelins, and all 3 of those are all getting +1 to the damage. And so that is helping us get more and more attacks. We've got lots of profiles here, and so we want to be able to add things to that. Artifact of Power, you're going to usually try to put that artifact on something else because there's some great options for us. If you aren't taking Thunder Lizards, you can actually make a pretty decent list if you're not in Thunder Lizards. If you're trying to get out of that command trait, you just want to make this guy as tanky as possible. You can add 1 to a save roll with Nimble. I think he does well in Thunder Lizards. But what we are trying to get a hold of is this Cloak of Feathers. This Skink artifact here is what we're going to be aiming for in our list building. So what that means is you're probably wanting to take a Warlord battalion so that you can get that extra artifact. And what Cloak of Feathers does, we've talked about this many times before, but it is awesome. It gives you 3 different abilities. First one is subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target the bearer. And so with that -1 to hit, we've already got -1 damage, and you can get him easily that +1 save if you're attacking the right thing You can use all out defense if you need to for another +1 to save. You can make this guy really, really tough to take down. Add 4 up to the bearer's move characteristics. This means he's trucking. He's moving fast. Now, instead of an 8-inch move, which is very slow, you're looking at 12, which is quite a bit better in Age of Sigmar 3.0 because a lot of our deployment zones are only 18 inches apart. There's some that are 22, but there's quite a few that are 18. And so if you're talking, you've already moved 12, now you're only looking to make a 6-inch charge. That's quite doable turn 1. Now all of a sudden, this guy is alpha striking pretty regularly on the table in Age of Sigmar 3. Also, the bearer can fly. That is an underrated ability here because now you can, if you make a good charge, you're going over those screens. You're flying up the board. You're going over those screens into something important that they're trying to keep alive by screening it out. And now you're flying right over the tops of those things. Also helps with board control as you're moving around things. You don't have to worry about terrain. You're just flying right over that. Fantastic ability there. Cloak of Feathers, I'm looking at lists to get that onto my Skink Chief. So let's talk about how we're going to buff this guy up. And we're going to kind of go through the timeline of how you need to do this. It's not really that complicated once you figure it out, but there is a lot of layers to it. And so let's talk first about the natural buff. So Coalesce does get -1 damage from attacks, going to help him stay alive longer. You get +1 jaw attacks. The Stegadon does have a jaw attack. It's worth 2 damage each, so don't forget to add that extra jaw attack in there. Thunder Lizard, you get +2 wound characteristics, so we're adding that onto making this guy tougher and harder to bring down. Prime Warbeast, the command trait, is +1 to attacks. We're adding all those attacks to that profile. And Cloak of Feathers, we're given +4 to move, -1 to hit, and fly. So those are just our natural buffs we're adding onto this Skink Chief. Well, we're going to go through the different phases here. Hero phase. We're looking at adding +1 attacks in melee from the Sacred Asterisms. You can choose here on the Sacred Asterisms whether you're going to do +1 to casting, +1 to attacks in melee, or +1 to run and charge. If you're really trying to cross a long distance, you might go +1 to run and charge just to make sure that you can get all the way across the board. But if not, if it's an 18-inch deployment, I'm looking at +1 to attacks in melee because we have so many profiles there that we're going to get extra juice into this War Scroll with those extra attacks. Here is where Age of Sigmar 3.0 really comes into effect, the heroic action. And so heroic action, there's a couple different options, but I'm looking to use Finest Hour on this Skink Chief. Usually in the turn, I'm wanting him to go into combat. And what it does is it gives +1 to save and +1 to wound rolls, which +1 to wound rolls is awesome for this Stegadon Chief because everything was hitting on 3s and 3s. Now we're down to 3s and 2s. We're getting a lot more consistent, and we have a lot of attacks to utilize that. So a fantastic ability there. +1 to save is great. If you're going into the right target, he's going to be -1 to hit, -1 damage, and +2 to his save. And so you're going to make him pretty tough. Now, +2 to save, obviously, you'll only counteract Ren there. You can only go so low, but a lot of stuff has Ren nowadays, so that'll help get you across that line. My next ability here I'm going to buff is a Skink Priest. I'm doing +1 to save and run, shoot, and charge. This is basically a prayer from the Priest, but not really. It's just an ability. You are rolling on it on a 3-up, and so a lot of times I'll try to bring 2 Priests to make sure I can try to get that roll. 3-up, it will fail sometimes, and there's nothing worse than failing that 1 3-up roll that you need turn 1 to get this guy in. So a lot of times I bring 2, just make sure they're within 12 of the Skink Chief. That way you can you can have a backup roll if you need to. On 2 dice, usually you're going to get one of those to 3-up. Doesn't always happen. If you watch my last battle report, I failed both of those turn 1. Luckily, it was only 18-inch deployment, so I was still able to make it in. But this is a fantastic ability because if you're running and shooting and charging with this, now you can go up to an extra 6 inches. Now you're moving 18, and then you're charging. So you're getting into anything you want to with this guy. So if this ability goes off, pick your target because you're going to hit him. Also, that +1 to save is great because now you're already at +1 to save for Priest, +1 to save for Finest Hour, and probably +1 to save for your Stegadon helmet that you're pointing at something. So you're up to +3. You're ignoring some good Ren there. Also, the Skink Priest has a command point. And this is my first command point I'm spending. So far, I haven't spent any command points. So this is the first one I'm going to spend. And it's going to be +1 to hit until your next hero phase. So that is a great ability because it's outside of that, shooting or um, combat phase. And so if you need to get over like a -1 to hit, you can use another command ability in the shooting or combat. But this also frees up your combat phase for command points there. And so this one is a fantastic use of a command point. Spend one here for +1 to hit. So now your Stegadon, everything is hitting on 2s and 2s. Everything except the Skink's javelins, but whatever. But everything else is hitting on 2s and 2s. That means those Sky Streak bows are now hitting pretty hard. Everything still only has -1 Ren, but you're getting a lot of those things through. You're forcing them to fail a lot of saves there. So awesome ability. Also, the Skink Priest. I'm probably going to take a prayer with the Skink Priest. You're looking either at guidance or heal is probably what you're putting on your skink, but they do know the blessed prayer innately. And so if you don't need to use one of those, throw up a 6-up ward save onto your Skink Chief on Stegadon. So now let's look at this here. He's getting really tough here. He's normally at a 4-up. He's -1 to hit. He's -1 damage. He's plus, what are we up to now? +3 to his save. And he's got a 6-up ward save. Yes. So he's getting tough. And he's tough, fast, and does damage. This is awesome. My next ability, so this is all just from one hero. This is the Skink Priest, 80 points. Fantastic use. We've only used one command point. My next hero I'm going to use to buff him is either the Star Seer or the Star Priest. It kind of depends on how you're going, what you want to use here. My default is the Star Priest because I think he's a little bit more flexible, but the Star Seer has some awesome abilities. But regardless of which one I'm going with, Hand of Glory is a spell that you really want on this Stegadon Chief if you can. It allows you to reroll 1s to hit. Rerolls are getting a lot more rare in Age of Sigmar 3, but reroll 1s to hit from this Hand of Glory is awesome, especially if you're hitting on 2s and wounded on 2s, and now you're rerolling 1s to hit. So you're getting a lot of those dice through on your hits, and you're getting most of those wound rolls through too. So this spell is fantastic for that. The Skink Star Priest has an ability. You just point your staff. You don't even have to roll anything for it at that Stegadon, and 6s to wound do a mortal wound. It's pretty good on the Stegadon. It's not necessary. I don't think it does add a little bit of mortal wound output. With this setup, I think you're going to end up doing about 30 attacks in total, and this does last until the next hero phase. So this is a pretty good one to put on him. You'll be fishing for a couple mortal wounds in total. You're talking 30 hit rolls. You're rolling 2-ups, re-rolling 1s on most of those. You're going to have quite a few mortals that you're going to do, so it's not a bad ability. The Skink's Star Seer. Now this one, if you can do this, I mean, it's fantastic. It has an 18-inch range, this spell, but it does -1 to save from to the enemy. And so this is fantastic when you can get it in range. If you really want it for a turn 1, you can buff it with like a Astrolith Bearer so you can get extra range. This might be a turn 2 play where the enemy's in range, but that effectively gives all your attacks -2 rend, which means it's hitting a lot harder. This one isn't quite as necessary, but it kind of depends on how you're rolling, because you can either go Star Priest or Star Seer, or combine them both and just put all your eggs in this one Skink Chief basket and do some awesome stuff. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next phase here. We're talking movement and charge phases, and so movement. If you got the roll off on the Skink Chief or on the Skink Priest, you're able to run and still shoot and charge. And so I'm looking to max that run up to a 6 if there's something I really need to get into. If we're deployed long, I'm probably going to max it. If we're not, if we're only on an 18-inch, I'm probably going to roll for the run. Now, in Age of Sigmar 3, you can't change it after you've rolled it, so you got to choose before you actually roll it, which isn't quite as good. But you do have that ability, especially if you have extra command points from your Slon or from your Croak or from your Star Priests. If you have enough command points, you could spend one here if you need to max out that run. That just gets you all the way. I mean, at that point, you're going 19 inches, 20 if you're using the Sacred Asterisms. I'm sorry, 19 if you're using the Sacred Asterisms. But you can get really far with this and pretty much guarantee your charge runs if you need to. The Scar, that's the wrong word. It's actually the Starseer there. He has a free ability, and Starseer, he has a free ability that you can use, and that it's a 3d6 charge, and you can charge outside of 18. So if you are going the Starseer route, you can actually get a huge charge. And because the Skink Chief is flying, you can make these huge charges up over screens. And so if you're looking for something in the back, they've left that juicy target for you back behind their screens. Fly right over the top. Go get them. In the combat phase, I think we have some great buffs in the combat phase, and that comes from that Skink Chief on Stegadon, and that's +1 to attacks. I'm going to take that over the +1 to hit because I'm already at 2s and 2s, rerolling 1s, so I want those extra attacks. And so I'm going to use his command ability to give him extra attacks. And at that point, you're getting, I think it's over 30 attacks in total from this Skink Chief. And so I've probably only spent 2 command points to get to this point. Maybe 3 if I need to reroll a charge or if I need to guarantee a run. But I've spent probably only 2 command points. Everything else is either automatic or a prayer roll, something that comes for free. And so it's a pretty good use of your resources. And those 2 heroes, like the Skink Priest and the Skink Star Priest, you're going to use them in other things in your army. So once you rocket this guy off, you're going to keep those Skink Priests and Skink Star Priests for something else. You're going to have them juice up something else next turn. Maybe even another Stegadon Chief. So in summary, we've got high movement here. We have 8-inch move plus 4-inch move from Cloak of Feathers, plus a 6-inch run if we need it. You can also add +1 to the asterism. So you're moving anywhere from 12 to 19 in the run and charge, or the movement and run there. We also got our 2d6 charge +1 from the asterisms if we need it, or the extra d6 from the Starseer if that's the route you choose to go. So you have a huge threat range. I mean, theoretically, your threat range is up to 38 inches with this big monster. Now, you don't need all that much because the table is only 44 inches from deployment or from edge to edge, and deployment zones are usually 18 to 22 inches apart. And so you don't even need all that much. So you can drop some of those synergies if you want to spend them on something else. But high movement here for this Skink Chief on Stegadon. When you look at the Warscroll, you go, this thing is slow. It only moves 8. We can add up to 30 inches of that if you need to. So it also has high damage. Hitting and wounded on 2s, re-rolling 1s. We have a lot of dice we're rolling, and we've got some great damage output. So how much damage can it do in this setup? Well, here we go. We're doing 45 damage versus a 4-up save. What? This is quite a bit better than it used to be in Age of Sigmar 2, where I think before it was, it was in the low 30s, I believe. I'd had to look back at the video, but now we're up over 45 if we're using that right combination. A lot of my games, I'm not using the Starseer, even though I think he is great, just because that -1 to save against the enemy is fantastic. But what I end up with in list building a lot is the Star Priest. And still a fantastic combo. You're getting 2 small heroes here to support the Skink Chief. A lot of automatic things that go off that don't use command points. You're using maybe 2 command points here. And you're juicing up here to 41 damage. You're over 40 damage versus a 4-up save. Even if they're boosting that down to a 3-up save, you're talking 32 damage. I don't know much stuff that's going to survive that. Even if they're on a 3-up going down to a 2-up, on average, you're going to do over 20 damage. That's pretty awesome. That's some great output here. If you're slamming this into some battle line or some big horde that has a bad save, let's say they have a 5-up save, you're going to do 50 damage versus that 5-up save. On average, again, results not guaranteed. Don't come back and be mad at me. This is a dice game. But this is awesome. This makes a great turn 1 play, in that you can buff this guy up, send him across, and you're going to cause a huge headache. And he's tough enough that it's going to take them probably their entire turn to take this guy down. And then you've still got the rest of your army. This was 300 points you sent across the board to kill a valuable target, and you've still got the rest of your army capturing objectives, harassing them other ways, and they had to deal with this monster flying into their ranks on a great alpha strike. The great thing is that you could easily include 2 of these in a list. And there I got my Chad, my Skink Chad over there. You get 2 Warlord battalions. So, and I'm not filling it out completely here, but we could take 2 Stegadon Chiefs, give one the Cloak of Feathers, and give the other one the Amulet of Destiny, which is that 5-up ward save. Now you've got one that's going to Alpha Strike. You're going to buff him up to the gills, Alpha Strike him, and then on turn 2, you've got another Stegadon Skink Chief that also has a 5-up ward save, and he's going to be busting into whatever they've got left. And so this makes a pretty good play. You've got some command point generation with the Star Priests, guidance for the Skink Priest will give you an extra command point. You've got a chance for 2 extra command points from the Star Priests. You have a way to generate command points even without a Slan here. And so I'm really liking this. This gets, you're gonna be high drops, but hey, if you go first, that's fine. You've still got almost 1,000 points here, and you can fill into battle line knights if you want to, or just fit in as many Stegadons as you can. That may be my list. So, oh man, I'm loving this Stegadon with Skink Chief. He's a lot of fun. It gives us a great opportunity to Alpha Strike. And I'm just, I see that 40 damage versus a 4-up in my I just get little hearts in my eyes. So, all right, guys, get out your Stegadons. I'll catch you guys on the next one.